So Arjun, why getting excited about the FINTERNET?
Okay, so so firstly, thank you for having us here. I should have said that up front. And thank you for giving us this opportunity. Now, let me begin with the fact that I know 1% of what the FINTERNET is, right? 99% of it is ahead of us. In simple terms, as someone put it very aptly during the Singapore FinTech Festival, it is a bold reimagination of what the financial system of the future could look like. For those who are not aware, it is a white paper which was co-authored by Augustine Carsten, who is the general manager at the BIS, and Nandan Nilekani, who is the, I think, non-executive chairman of Infosys. Both of them are incredibly smart and iconic humans. In simple terms, I guess what the FinTernet is the reimagination of a financial system which is based on the same principles of how the internet is today, right? Whether that is it's open, whether it is accessible, to a large extent democratized and borderless, right? To me, that's kind of the start of what the FinTernet is. And I think as this conversation goes further, we'll go a little bit deeper into it, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned imagination of or reinventing of what we already have regarding a financial services and the financial services system. So Panagiotis, I was curious, yeah, how is it different from today's financial system? Or maybe to portray a bit today's financial system to see, yes, what's the comparison?
I mean, as Arjun mentioned, for me, the most interesting piece. So the FinTernet is, the internet of financial services, right? So I think the analogy should be imagine, for example, standalone computers, and then imagine what internet did to them in terms of connecting. So that's the big benefit here. So the big thing is you have now things working very well, bits and pieces here and there, but they are not interconnected. There's no interoperability. So the idea is we have the infrastructure, let's build the connecting pieces, let's connect the dots, and let's get added value out of this. So that's for me the game changer. It's a very ambitious idea. At the end of the day, it needs lots of consensus, it needs lots of action behind. But like with the internet, I mean, things can start from a very simple and ambitious idea, and then they can go from there. So it's.
So I'm going to add to what Panagiotis said. These are not my words, but actually someone else who I heard, who actually said it very well. Again, I forget which forum it was. He said, financial services today, highly fragmented, does not know how to put the customer at the heart of it, right? And as you said, is predominantly centralized or highly centralized, right? The FinTernet sort of turns it on its head, right? It brings interconnectedness, it drives harmonization of different levels, and then it goes down the route of decentralization. How far the route of decentralization, I guess we're in no position to kind of predict that today. Yeah.
And basically, I think if you look at what's happening today, you're going to see many success stories on a regional level, on a local level, on a national level. And the question is, how do you go to the next level? And I think interoperability, I think, is the big ask, is the big kind of X factor in this, in the whole setup. And that's why it's important. That's why it can make a real difference.
So since you mentioned interoperability and this idea of building, here I'm thinking technology plays an important part. So Arjun, can you stress a bit what are some technological developments that we need in order to make it decentralized, interoperable?
Okay, well, let me try. So I'll be only able to answer what I know today in terms of the total technology landscape which is required to make it happen. Two, which get most bandied about, is tokenization. It exists. We're moving in the right direction, whether that is tokenization of financial securities or real-world assets, right? We're starting to see that happen. The other is around unified ledgers, right? Which is, in simple terms, a shared digital platform where a number of your, I guess, digital assets, CBDCs, and other forms of tokenized assets can coexist in a collective form. There is an element of smart contracts. So I think a lot of these technologies exist, right? And I think a lot of these technologies are based on this sort of long list. And I had to actually go and read the paper again. A lot of these principles that they're trying to achieve, right? Interoperability is right there, right? Then there's scalability, there is security, it's privacy, immutability, programmability, and you can go on, and that's, I guess, where the complexity comes. Where how do you manage so many principles at the same time? Technology exists; it's the application of the technology which I think will be the tricky one.
Yeah, and I'm curious, Panagiotis, besides technology, already there are some initiatives and payment initiatives and solutions, especially in Europe, US, because I have a feeling that the idea was, the birthplace of this idea of the FINTERNET is more in Asia, starting from the Indian stack, the Aadhaar and the UPI. So I have the feeling that similar developments, but more scattered, are happening in Europe and US. How can we reunite these pieces of puzzle and make the FINTERNET indeed an interoperable and global solution?
I mean, you mentioned Asia, and I think it's a good example because, Project Nexus, for example, in Asia is, I would say, a very good example of trying to connect payment systems of different countries. And I think there's lots of added value there. And I think it's not by accident that payments is at the forefront of this development. And looking, for example, at what's happening in Europe, what's happening in the US, I think it's all about consensus, right? I mean, conceptually, the problem is again the same. I mean, it might not have the same name, so you might not call it FINTERNET. But if you look, for example, what's the main problem, or what's the main issue that we have in Europe today, is again interoperability. And that's why you have it's a totally different concept. But if you look, why the Europeans, they want to have a digital euro, why you have initiatives like Vero from UPI, the European Payments Initiative, why you have some regional initiatives, why you have, for example, across the globe CBDCs and trying to connect to each other. I think this is, so all these things, they are the same topic. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the FINTERNET, maybe not in the same way, but I think it kind of illustrates the approach, the problem, and the opportunity. So even within, let's say, the same continent, even within the same Europe, we say we have a European Union, but even in today's status quo, we are not having a connected system, right? And something needs to be done, and there is a huge benefit of doing so. So I think the FINTERNET is exactly the same concept, but bringing this to a global level.
I like that. I like the way he said it, just if I could add to it, is that at the very least, FINTERNET can be considered as a direction of travel, right?
Yeah.
And also, I don't think we should preclude the concept that you might see lots and lots of mini FINTERNETs come around, right? You don't have to boil the ocean in one attempt. And maybe there is a future where a number of these mini FINTERNETs then connect with each other, right? So I think from a paper perspective, I think it's aspirational. I think that was the intent, right? But sorry, you had another question.
No, I was curious, but in a way you kind of answered a bit. I was curious to know who should start it. Okay, we have the paper now, and now we have to build it. We have the concepts, the ideas, and in a way you kind of alluded with this idea of mini FINTERNETs. I have the feeling that everyone can be an initiator, private or public institutions, technology companies. And by developing all these mini FINTERNETs, this can be reunited into a big one. However, I'm curious from both of you to see how to kick off this vision. I mean, to really make it
it's a very
happen.
good question, right? You ask, how do you kick off the vision? So I think in all intents and purposes, and again, I go back to the event, which is in Singapore FinTech Festival. I attended a closed-door event, which was about 3 hours. We talked about the FINTERNET, and actually some amount of work has been kicked off. And yes, it's being spearheaded by the Indians, right? Largely because I think, I do not know the order in which this paper came about, but I think originally it was Nandan's paper, which was written, then it was socialized with BIS, and then it became a bigger paper. So you mentioned a very important point. Public-private partnership is going to be incredibly important for FINTERNET to work wherever it gets initiated, right? In simple terms, what will happen or what is expected is that, the the central government, the regulators provide you with the infrastructure layer, right? And then the private sector comes in, innovates on top, right? One is that. Secondly is for this to be borderless and interoperable, you need a certain level of regulatory harmonization, right?
Yeah.
Now, we all appreciate that the current geopolitical situation in the world is that we are becoming more and more of a multipolar world, which is not actually a surprise because actually we've always been a multipolar world in a lot of ways, right? It's just that it's come to the fore a little bit more because there is that much more conversation going on today,
It's more
right?
vocal now. Yeah.
And my view is that a lot of that regulatory harmonization will be driven by the geopolitics, right, of a particular country. So, I don't know to what level harmonization will happen. I think Nexus is a great idea because even with Nexus, I personally don't think Nexus is going to be, 180 countries all coming together. I think, there'll be some countries where there is bilateral or multilateral
More
connectedness, which will do. But please, Panagiotis, add to it.
No, I very much agree. I think the fact that we have, at the end of the day, the geopolitics, as Arjun mentioned, it plays a big role. I think the challenge is how do you incentivize, because on the one hand side, you have the financial sense, that it makes sense, the added value, that people see the difference, but it has also to make political sense and geopolitical sense. And that's not always a given. And even if it's a given, even if the intent is here, from theory to action, it can be very different. So we might need time, we might need the consensus, for example, to set up common processes, to set up, let's say, the connecting pieces, how everything should work. So that takes time. And and for us Europeans, I think the example of what we have been trying to achieve in Europe, let's say, with all this legislation, PSD2, PSD3, even if the intention is there, you see how long does it take to unite, let's say, many countries. So imagine this, extrapolate this on a global level. So I think that gives us the magnitude of the challenge.
Yeah, you mentioned a bit about this concept of incentivizing participants and coupling this with the idea that most of the technologies used are going to be based on tokenization, distributed ledgers. What do you think? Do businesses that now are developing this type of technologies or are embracing this type of transacting, like crypto exchanges or digital currency vaults or whatever, do they have like an advantage in this new model of the FINTERNET?
Well, so the answer would be yes, they do have an advantage because in effect they are adopting and learning they're learning the technologies which are going to be used in the future. But having an advantage doesn't necessarily mean that you can always act on it. I think the point which you started the question with is to me more important, which is for any of this to be successful, let's not underestimate the need for what I call user education and awareness, and specifically around trust, right? I think a lot of these new technologies and a lot of these exchanges have not really built the necessary amount of trust.
Security. Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
I
So I do think that I would, in addition to everything that Panagiotis and I have said so far, whether it is regulation, scalability of technology, private-public sector participation, the concept of really understanding what interoperability means, because a lot of these new technologies are, in my humble opinion, being built on closed-loop networks, right? I think let's not underestimate the trust factor, which is going to be down to education and awareness and bringing people on a journey, which is why I think FINTERNET as a concept is a great direction of travel. I don't think it's coming in the next year or two. I do think that we will see mini FINTERNETs or adaptations, right? And I think that happens, then we get enough momentum behind it, and we'll start to see greater connectivity and interoperability. I don't think technology is what's going to define any of this. That I think we have ample enough intellect out there to build the technology issue.
This was also one of the takes of today's panel, that technology alone doesn't solve everything. Panagiotis, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I very much endorse everything that Arjun has said. At the end of the day, technology will be there. We're going to find, I mean, the reason why you are now using the, tokenization and smart contracts is that this is a technology that is globally recognized. Everybody understands what they do, but then the human element is very, very important, right? The goals. And then at the end of the day, as Arjun mentioned, the added value, the trust building, all of these elements is what is going to make the difference between make or break, right? I mean, and once people are, they start seeing the real difference in their day-to-day, I think that's going to drive growth and that's going to drive adoption. So if in these mini FINTERNETs, I mean, if we see how things are behaving, how added value is being built step by step, and then we take this, we connect to another one, and then we connect to another one, and then probably we have something that is greater than the sum of the elements.
See, I do want to add something to what Panagiotis said because a thought came to my mind, right? Two areas which I think are going to be very interesting is legal frameworks, right?
Yeah.
Right? And I think a lot of people are not realizing that, tokenization of real world assets, one of the biggest questions which has to be answered is legal frameworks. And the second is actually compliance to local rules and regulations that exist, right? So classically, in my humble opinion, a number of regulators sort of struggle to regulate the use of a technology in financial services because they're not regulating the technology itself.
Or they cannot regulate
Or they cannot regulate the technology itself, right? And a lot of these technologies are moving so quickly because they're at least in my humble opinion, at their infancy, that it becomes quite complex. Sorry, I just wanted to add that. Now, on the event, so to be honest with you, I've been here, this is my second time, first time in this location. I think very well organized event. My only request to the Romanian cohorts is that they have a good story to tell, but we need to hear more from them on the global stage, right? A number of your peer countries from this region are starting to do a good job. So my suggestion to Banking 4.0 and the powers to be is, let's hear from you guys at more at the global level. I think that would be quite healthy for the ecosystem here.
For me, great event is not the first time I've been here. So I think I very much appreciate all the networking, all the topics. I think the addition of the human element next to all the other things that we are discussing is very, very important. We had some great discussions. I think the fact that you're trying now to make this event a bit more international, to connect it to more things happening outside, not necessarily next to the border, but also going beyond. I think that's very important, and keep doing this, and I think you are on a great path.